I'd like to know from your own words about you.
About the more recent work, about this thing that I had done for Freeze, or generally?
Generally, yes.
I think that it's sort of, Tiziana, it's changing. It's changing quite a bit now. I've been sort of interested in certain things for the past 6 years, and ever since I was studying in the US, and then I came back to live in Pakistan. And I think that experience of moving back to live here was when so I started thinking about a few things, which I continued doing. But a lot of my work was about the very hierarchical. I mean, Pakistan is such a hierarchical society, and it sort of defines politics, and it defines social relationships and class relationships, and in a way that and you feel that people also just keep sort of silent about it in some ways. There isn't a very big middle class in Pakistan, so it's a very elite class, and then there's a small middle class and a very large working class. And so, for the longest time, for the past 6 years or so, I've just been thinking a lot about these things, and I think most of my work up to now has reflected that. Whether it's this video that I had done where called Reserved, which is about a VIP who's about to arrive in a city, and everyone's life is put on a standstill for that reason, because they're all waiting for him, and children are preparing to sort of wave flags at him, and somebody else is waiting for him in a conference hall. And I mean, it's a very sort of interestingly a very recognizable thing that we've all experienced. So a lot of that, and then I did my last video was about the architecture of visa offices in in embassies. And again, it was about power and this kind of slightly subservient culture amongst civil society.
I was wondering, maybe this is a banal question, but from my point of view, did you have problems showing these kind of things? I mean, are you free to do this kind of work as an artist?
Completely. I mean, it is. Unfortunately, I think that art is very elitist, of course, and the gallery spaces are still very closed off spaces. And I think that's kind of unfortunate. And I think so there's also a big language divide in Pakistan. So there's the English speaking audiences. Although the art world in Pakistan is very democratic. It's people who are artists are from all across the social, class sector, all classes. But the audiences are usually sort of these upper middle class educated people in galleries, and those are very exclusive spaces. And nothing that I'm very happy about, but that's the reality of it. And I think so a lot of visual art does not really reach the eyes and experiences of a majority of people in Pakistan. It would be more in the line of something that's happening on TV or film, popular media, where people would have to be careful about what kind of statements they're making, especially when it comes to religion. Now, more recently. So to be critical of religion is a tough one. So you can't do that on popular media. But there's extreme freedom. And I mean, Pakistan is like, it's a very mixed bag of things. There's lots of contradictions. So whereas it seems very narrow in terms of from the outside about issues of intolerance, the craziest things can also get by, but things also happen. So very drastically negative things can happen, but people also get by making extremely critical and brilliant work. So it's very hard to define. I think there is freedom of expression. I think political agitation is controlled in certain areas, like people organizing themselves for certain causes in the country is tougher because the military intelligence and different people are involved in controlling that. But overall, it's sort of up and down. It's very confusing for us also. So every time you want to do something which might be more public, you think, should I be doing this? And then you do it, and of course it's fine, it works, and sometimes, some other times it may not. So freedom is not an issue. I think that's not an issue. I think there are lots of audience is in fact an issue. Is like, who is the audience? You know, whether, because it gets a bit dull after a while to have this super elitist audience who are not also very intelligent. Unfortunately, it's not a very heavily intellectual audience. It's sort of very lifestyle oriented. Like, I mean, you have like a lot of collectors and you know, glitterati in the art world. It's a very lifestyle oriented audience. So it's not necessarily an intellectually rigorous audience in that way.
Okay, so you were saying that this was your the way you used to work in the recent past. So how...
This is what I have been doing, and I think that even the film that I showed at Documenta came from a similar interest in how politicians sort of have this, you know, the tradition of politicians having statues made of themselves. Dying politicians, older politicians, people who are dead and whatever. So that came from the same trajectory. And now I think that I'm sort of moving away. I think I'm sort of done with that in many ways. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. And these days I'm thinking a lot about what you saw at Freeze. And then I don't know whether you saw my project that is a box full of flick books. So that's a project I did last year. And I think that's what I'm very interested in. And I'm reading, you know, I've just started thinking a lot about individual people, individuals in society who are kind of helpless, but helpless and frustrated, or whatever it may be, and their ways of coping with life. And I think for me, at a very autobiographical level, it has a lot to do with my parents. My father's passed away 6 years ago, and my mother is here, and it's seeing them kind of withdraw from society and find their own ways of coping, because they are of the generation that saw the creation of Pakistan and India, the separation. So it's also this generation that has accumulated knowledge and sort of archived all these experiences and are old, and there's a lot of disappointment of where the world has progressed and how things have progressed, and there's no way out. And so they have these sort of eccentric lives. So I'm interested in eccentricity, which is similar to the eccentricity of an artist, as a way of sort of existing. But it's a sort of a generational thing, you know, where this whole thing of older people getting into very, very particular habits on a daily basis, and the habits from waking up to going to sleep is really their world. And often it's not that it's because they have nothing else to do. It's somehow I feel that it's a way of escaping, escaping the life outside of their homes, because they don't have the emotional wherewithal or to kind of handle it. And of course, in this case, I'm talking about my parents, because for my mother, for instance, contemplates on a daily basis whether she should stop subscribing to the newspaper. And she only gets the paper to do crossword and Sudoku, because she can't deal with. I mean, she finds it's really hard to cope. And so she has piles of newspapers around her armchair, and all she does is Sudoku and crossword. And that's why the newspaper comes to our house. So it's like piles of things around her. And she's an extremely intelligent woman who in the past is politically opinionated, is, you know, just as a very engaged citizen. And it's also about not being able to find a solution anywhere. So sometimes the news and the enormity of the problem, it becomes very, very heavy.
Yeah.
When you encounter the same thing and you feel any particular conflict that you are aware of is not getting resolved, and it's been 50 years or 30 years or 40 years. And so I think it's a combination of not being able to cope with news on a daily basis, but also the accumulation of history. The accumulation of history in an old person's mind, yeah, is very hard. So they live with the burden of, you know, 80 years of things haven't happened, and they're at the end of their lives and things haven't changed. So, but it's not. I'm saying that is sort of the thing that got me thinking about these people who are living alone and how they cope with life. And that's very particular, but of course then it extends to the idea of communities of people. I mean, that's just an instance as an old individual, but it's about people who are disenfranchised and isolated and how they cope.